So the connector, in order to work, has to spin. It has to rotate in the servo arm. Here's a completely assembled one, and the connector spins. It rotates in the servo arm. Okay? So the way we achieve that is we're going to put the connector through the servo arm. We're going to take one of our washers. We're going to put it on the connector body. We're going to take the round nut and we're going to spin it on, and we're going to tighten it, but we're not going to tighten it all the way. We're going to go just snug and then back off so that the connector can rotate. Okay? It should rotate easily. Now we want to freeze the assembly in place just like this, so we're going to put a drop of medium CA glue on the head of the nut, and all that's going to do is lock the nut onto the connector. We're not going to glue anything to the servo arm because this has to rotate on the servo arm. So all we're going to do is snug it down, then we're going to back it off a little bit so that it can rotate. We're going to take a drop of glue, and we placed it just on the end of the nut, not onto the white of the servo arm, just on the end of the nut. We want to take our CA accelerator and mist a little bit on there. Now, I'm using medium CA here because I don't want the glue to run off and drip onto the servo arm. If that happens, and if it all gets locked together, I'll have to start over. I'll have to take my debonder and take the glue off and start over. So it just took a few seconds, and our servo connector is now installed on our servo arm in the third hole, and it easily rotates. Okay, that's what we're after. Easy rotation. If this was tight, we would have to stop and redo it because the servo can't overcome that kind of force. We need this to rotate easily. Alright? So that's how we do it. Now if you want to, you can trim off the end of this servo arm. There's a little bit left over. That's fine. It weighs a fraction of a gram. That's up to you. So this is now a completed servo arm and connector for the 41-inch edge. Again, if you were using HS65 servos, you would use this arm and you would use the outermost hole. Same procedure, it just looks a little different. It's a different servo with a different arm. Okay, so now we're going to prepare a servo to install in the airplane. If you're using the HS45 HB servos, then your tail servos, the ones on your elevator and your rudder, are going to require a 9-inch extension. In this case, I'm using an E-flite brand lightweight 9-inch. Again, if you want to know how to lighten your airplane up, this is a good way. I'm going to plug it into the servo. I'm going to make sure that my wire colors are correct. All servos have a wiring pattern which is a light colored wire, a red or orange wire, and a dark colored wire. In this case, this high-tech servo has a yellow, red, black, and the E-flite extension is orange, red, black, but it still conforms to the light color, orange or red, and dark color. You want to make sure that light goes to light, dark goes to dark. This is a servo lock. It's a lightweight piece of material molded so that it clicks over your connection and locks in place so that your extension can't come loose. These are nice pieces to have. You can pick them up at any hobby store. If you don't have these, you can also use a piece of tape. It works equally well. So a servo lock or a piece of tape, just make sure that your servo extension can't fall off. And there you have a servo ready to install in the tail of the 41-inch edge. Servo screws are included in your servo hardware pack. Here's the HS65HB hardware pack with 2 servo mounting screws, and we're going to use those to mount the servo. Servo mounting screws are not included in your kit. They come with your servo, or at least they do if you buy high-tech servos. Okay, so now we're going to install some servos in the tail of the airplane. We're going to have to remove the covering over the servo openings to start. Like everything else we remove covering over, we have to actually find it first. So we're going to use our finger, and we're going to find right here under the leading edge of the horizontal stabilizer, an inch down, we find two identical rectangular holes that are servo sized. The one in the back is for our rudder servo. On the other side, plane's mirror image, we could do this on either side, but the front one on the correct side is going to be for our elevator servo. So what we're going to do is, on the same side that we installed our elevator control horn, we're going to remove the covering over the front servo bay, and we're going to install the elevator servo right there. And we'll just trim the edges up. Okay, so there's the elevator servo location. As we mentioned earlier, if you're using the HS45 HB servos, we'll need to lengthen the hole just a little bit. You can see this by putting the servo up against the hole. It's going to be a little bit tight. So what we'll do is take our knife, just take a little bit off the end of the opening, and that should fit the servo case fine. Okay, so now we're going to install the servo. We're going to take the servo, we run the wire up through the fuselage, we push the servo into the hole with the servo head facing toward the rear of the airplane, and now we're going to install our two servo screws. Okay, we now have the elevator servo installed. So next we're going to install our push rod. Okay, so the Edge kit contains 4 push rods. 2 are the same length. These are your aileron push rods. And then you have a long and a short. Long is for your rudder, short is for your elevator. So let's take that one. Okay, so we're going to install the elevator push rod. There's a bend on the end of the push rod. This is called a Z-bend. What you want to do is take the end with the Z-bend, insert it into the hole in the elevator control horn, and now the push rod is installed. You can check it, make sure it's free, and next we'll install the servo arm. Okay, so now we're ready to install our servo arm onto our airplane. So we have the servo connector is threaded through the servo arm. We have a drop of glue on the nut so that it can spin, but it can't fall off in flight. We take our 1.5mm hex tool. We loosen the black Allen set screw in the end of the servo connector so that we can slide it over the push rod and install it onto the servo as shown. Then we take our servo screw, and we're going to replace the servo screw right through the center of the arm. We'll tighten this down. Now, what we'll do is we'll leave the servo connector set screw loose until after we've set up our radio. Once we have our sub-trim zeroed out, we may have to remove this, reset the arm, and we'll tighten this down as a final setup item when we're doing our setup on the airplane once it's completed. But this is how the elevator control system works. Servo, arm, push rod connector, push rod, control horn, elevator.